So what next? Are we going to have a repeat of this on Monday, or what? Just
Probably.
walk us through that suspected timeline that you touched on.
Sorry?
Can you walk us through that suspected timeline you touched on?
Well, so next week we will have a recommendation from city administration. I don't know what that recommendation will be. I certainly know what I suspect it will be, and I suspect it will be mostly pens down now until after Pyeongchang. We will probably need to keep some sort of skeleton group together to make sure that we don't lose the expertise and to make sure that we are continuing the conversations as needed and answering some of the questions the council has raised. So the idea then would be the council would get just a little work plan in September talking about what kind of resources are needed and what kind of work would be done should they choose to move forward. And if that is the case, then again, probably not a lot would be done between September and after the Pyeongchang Olympics. But you need a little bit of continuing conversation with the federal government, with the provincial government, with the COC and with the IOC. That would be my guess.
And so there's still, I believe it's $2 million left from that $5 million. Is the
Yes.
thought that for that small group who's still picking up a salary, that would go to pay it?
Yeah, you know, I can't imagine there would be extraordinary costs. You know, the big cost was in hiring experts and consultants and a lot of travel to get us the big report. So I can't imagine there would be much more that would be needed for the next few months.
If this brings, as the city official said, the debt near or to the limit, or through the limit, is that like an auto hard no for the city?
I really appreciate that my colleagues on council are asking these questions about debt. I've been really trying to get the whole community woken to the issue of debt for many, many years, and I think that we're managing our debt incredibly well. We have a stellar credit rating, one of the best of any city in the country. It's something that I am very, very keen on preserving. That said, it is much, much, much too early to make assumptions about what a bid might look like in terms of the city's overall debt profile. What you heard some of my colleagues on council saying was assuming that every penny would be borrowed and it would all be borrowed by the city. I don't think there's any scenario in which that would happen. But of course, the city would only take on any borrowing, if any borrowing whatsoever were required, would only take on any borrowing in accordance with our own debt policies and our requirement to maintain that credit rating.
So given this would not be a City of Calgary show, start to finish full budget, how great of a concern would this be? Or is it misplaced at this time simply because of all the unknowns?
It is not misplaced. It is a very important consideration. It is extremely premature to start doing any calculations based on it because we just don't have any numbers.
So when that debt limit came up, what was the amount that the city was calculating that Calgary would take?
There hasn't really been one. We've just been doing very, very broad estimates, but there really is nothing in there that I would say, well, this is a realistic view, because we just don't know. You know, to be blunt, the city probably shouldn't take on any debt because the capital should be covered by other orders of government, and the operating costs should not have a deficit. Those are, I'm not going to say those are lines in the sand, but those are certainly principles that one would start with in this conversation.
You had mentioned that if it's a no from the province or the feds, it's all over. In your discussions that you've had, have you gotten any indication? Have they said, have they leaned one way or the other? Or?
I think that it's fair to say that both of the other orders of government have suggested that we're doing the right thing and that we're asking the right questions and to continue doing this work so that they have the information they need in order to make a decision. I suspect it'll be relatively easy for the federal government to fit this into their existing framework. The provincial government will really have to get their heads around it.
Just because
Given their debt situation, sir, wouldn't you say that this is something that they really need to be very careful of? Or do they have great latitude, which is why they're not saying no outright?
Yes.
One last question.
In terms of Sean Chu's notice of motion, we just missed it because the press conference was going on. Can you just let us know what happened in regards to this?
It failed 13-2. The arguments that council were making, probably the most prescient one was the one from Councillor Pincott, who said, if we don't have the information we need to make a decision, how in the world do we expect the public to make a decision with even less information than what we've got? And I think that's very clear. And I've said before, and I'll say again, that when we think about a long-term plan, depending on what kinds of commitments would be required of the city of Calgary, I'm not opposed to doing a plebiscite at that time. But of course, the plebiscite has to be an informed one. Otherwise, it just becomes a glorified online poll for $400,000, which is not really that helpful.